So, Squid Game is back, Season 3 is dropping, and Variety just published an article packed with eye-popping numbers. 600 million global views, 19.5 billion social impressions, and the most watched Netflix TikTok clip of all time. That's not just buzz, that's a digital earthquake. But we need to pause for a second and ask, does buzz still matter the way it used to? Or better yet, does it mean what we think it means? Let's rewind. When Season 1 dropped in September 2021, it didn't just trend, it became the cultural phenomenon. Red jumpsuits were everywhere. The giant doll was a Halloween staple. People who hadn't watched a foreign language show before were suddenly binging 9 subtitle episodes in a weekend. And then you had MrBeast recreate the whole thing on YouTube, drawing hundreds of millions of views and bringing the show's premise into mainstream influencer culture. Season 1 wasn't just popular, it was inescapable. Then came the wait. Over 3 years before Season 2 finally hit in December of 2024. Netflix still called it a hit. 192.6 million views, biggest premiere week. But here's what's striking. It came and went without the cultural aftershock. The memes didn't materialize, the Halloween costumes didn't spike, the event energy just wasn't there. It did big numbers, but it didn't stick. And yeah, we could point fingers at the release gap, but to be fair, even Yellowstone, which I often hold up as a model for long-term audience loyalty, wasn't immune to this either. The first half of Season 5 aired in early 2023, but Part 2 didn't drop until November 2024, and it didn't wrap up until the very end of the year. So yes, the release cadence issue is a widespread problem, but here's the key difference. Yellowstone had built trust. It had consistency. It didn't need to recapture the lightning because it was the lightning, season after season. And here's what's wild. Yellowstone was the most popular show on television for years. And if you were only paying attention to Twitter or TikTok, you'd never know. It was on a basic cable channel, the Paramount Network, formerly known as Spike TV. And yet it absolutely crushed the ratings. No viral dances, no filter challenges, no Netflix homepage push. It thrived on audience loyalty, not algorithmic hype. This is where we get to the heart of the issue. Streaming platforms have trained us to chase moments, not movements. They've built an entire content strategy around flash-in-the-pan sensations. The next Friends, the next Office, the next Big Bang Theory. Those aren't coming from streaming because the infrastructure's not there. When a show disappears for 2 or 3 years between seasons, you're not building legacy, you're building disposable content. And no, this isn't just Netflix. It's the whole streaming ecosystem. The model is geared toward headlines, not heartbeats. Which brings us back to that other trap, equating virality with value. Let me give you the perfect example. Sharknado. That movie was a social media supernova in 2013. It was absurd, self-aware, and it absolutely blew up on Twitter. But did that meme magic make The Asylum a Hollywood powerhouse? Not even close. Sure, they milked 5 sequels out of the franchise, but outside that series, no one's racing to stream Mercenaries, their Expendables mockbuster, or Battle Star Wars, or Android Cop, or Titanic 2, or the Mega Shark movies. And yes, those are all real titles. The meme didn't launch a brand, it just launched a fleeting interest. There was no audience loyalty, just curiosity. And speaking of meme-fueled flops, let's talk about Morbius. When Sony released it in 2022, it tanked. But the internet latched on to it ironically, memeing that infamous line, "It's Morbin time." That caught on so hard that Sony misread the room and re-released the movie in theaters, assuming the memes translated into genuine demand. It bombed again. That re-release might be the most brutal reality check Hollywood's had in a decade. Memes do not equate to money. Contrast that with Madam Web, another Spider-Man spinoff that absolutely cratered in theaters. Brutal reviews, even its stars, Dakota Johnson and Sydney Sweeney, disowned it publicly right after release. But when it hit Netflix, something strange happened. It charted. Why? because people already had Netflix. Worst case scenario, they waste 2 hours of their life. That's the streaming safety net. When discovery is frictionless, bad movies can still perform decently. Doesn't mean they're good, just means they're convenient. And we've seen this story before. Back in 2006, the internet was obsessed with Snakes on a Plane. The title was a meme before the movie even had a trailer. Sam Jackson's "I've had it with these" line.
Enough is enough! I have had it with these monkey-fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday plane! Everybody strap in! I'm about to open some freaking windows.
That line, that wasn't even in the script originally. It was added during reshoots because fans demanded it. And when the movie dropped, it didn't flop outright, but it underwhelmed. It cost $33 million to make and barely made a profit. But here's where it gets interesting. The Asylum, the Sharknado guys, released a mockbuster called Snakes on a Train just 10 days before Snakes on a Plane hit theaters. It cost $1 million to make and somehow delivered what the other one didn't: a giant snake eating a train. Some people actually prefer Snakes on a Train because, at the very least, it follows through on its absurd promise. And honestly, Snakes on a Plane feels like something Roger Corman would have made for $500,000 and some bologna sandwiches in 1988. Instead, it got a Hollywood-sized budget and lost its edge in the process. Then we've got The Interview, the 2014 movie with Seth Rogen and James Franco. Now, personally, I liked that movie. I was always going to see it, irregardless. But then the Sony hack happened, and it ballooned into an international incident. Suddenly, this goofy political comedy was being pulled from theaters, and people were accusing North Korea of cyber terrorism. North Korea denied the hack, but praised the hackers as heroes. All because The Interview had the audacity to make fun of Kim Jong-un. When it finally premiered on Sony's streaming platform Crackle, which, by the way, was free and ad-supported for those that don't know, it got a ton of views, but it didn't turn into a movement. And here's what I think. Sony missed an opportunity with The Interview. If they had delayed the release, tightened security, and spun the marketing as a patriotic stand, come see the movie North Korea doesn't want you to watch, it could have had a massive box office run. Instead, it dropped with a whimper, and now it's more remembered for the leak than the laughs. And all of this circles back to one truth. Attention isn't affection. Headlines don't equal history. Which brings me to Team America World Police, another film that poked fun at North Korea and got a theatrical release, mind you. It didn't break box office records, but over time, it became a cult classic. The satire was ridiculous, the puppets were crude, and the humor was chaotic. But people came back to it, and not just because it's funny, because it was fearless. Sean Penn, who was parodied in the film, wrote an open letter accusing creators Trey Parker and Matt Stone of being reckless, even suggesting the movie could start a war. Parker and Stone, being Parker and Stone, laughed it off. And that's part of why Team America stuck. It came from the same creators behind South Park, a show already known for its unapologetic satirical edge. That legacy gave the film staying power. It's also why people still go back and watch Basketball, not because it was a blockbuster, but because Trey and Matt star in it, even though they didn't write or direct it. That one was directed by David Zucker, one of the minds behind Airplane. But Trey and Matt's involvement gave it shelf life. Again, it comes back to audience loyalty, not just first week headlines. So when Variety says Squid Game is still a global phenomenon, sure, the numbers are there, but we have to ask, what kind of phenomenon is it? Is it meaningful, or is it just another blip in the never-ending stream of content? Are people rewatching it, talking about it, dressing up as characters years later? Or are they just watching it because it's what's on the homepage? That's the real risk for streaming platforms. They've built their houses on moments, but moments pass. And if you don't build loyalty, if you don't deliver consistency, you end up with shows like Squid Game Season 2. Huge viewership, minimal staying power. And meanwhile, the Yellowstones, the Team Americas, and even the Snakes on a Trains of the world, they find their audiences slowly. They live on in conversation. Not because they were viral, but because they were distinctive. They scratched an itch, they left a mark. So here's the bottom line. Virality is cheap, memes are fleeting, but audience loyalty? That's the real prize. And it's one that streaming platforms keep fumbling, either by waiting too long between seasons, chasing algorithmic relevance, or making engagement for impact. If they want their next big hit to be more than a spike on a dashboard, maybe it's time to start treating shows not as content drops, but as creative investments with long-term emotional returns. Otherwise, we're just watching the same loop. Different costumes, different memes, same vanishing act. Because in the end, it's not about what trends, it's about what lasts. And I want to hear from you. Do you think streaming platforms can ever build shows with the same staying power as cable era hits like Friends or The Office? Or are we stuck in a cycle of hype and burnout? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious where you stand on this. And hey, if you made it all the way to the end, drop the code word train snake in the comments. It's a little nod to our favorite low-budget overachiever and everything this video is really about. What sticks, what slithers by, and what actually swallows the train.